They laughed before she ever spoke. 250 elite operators stood in a half circle, arms crossed, eyes sharp, measuring her in a single glance. One man leaned forward, smirk carved deep into his face, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "A seal that soft?" The words landed like a challenge. Seconds later, the laughter vanished, and the ground told a different story. Asterisk, what city are you watching from today? If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe for more stories about extraordinary people. Her name was Mara Cole, and she wore no insignia that morning. No rank, no unit badge. Just a plain training shirt and the calm expression of someone who had learned to survive storms without showing the scars. The facility was one of those places that never appeared on maps, a compound where reputations were tested and legends were quietly verified. Mara had been assigned there as a temporary instructor, or so the paperwork said. What it did not say was how many doors she had already walked through that others never found. She stood at the edge of the mat, hands loose at her sides, listening as the briefing ended. The operators were veterans from different units, different countries, all gathered for a joint readiness evaluation. They were confident, loud, and unafraid to challenge anything that looked out of place. And to them, Mara looked out of place. She was smaller than most of them, lighter on her feet, her voice steady but unraised. When she introduced herself, a ripple of whispers followed. The mocking did not start with cruelty. It started with doubt. One man asked where she had trained. Another joked about whether she was there to take notes or pour coffee. Mara answered plainly, never defensive, never sharp. She had learned long ago that the loudest response was often silence backed by skill. Still, the smirking man pushed further. He stepped onto the mat without being asked and tilted his head. "You here to teach us breathing exercises?" he said. "Or maybe how to stay soft under pressure?" The group laughed again. It was not hatred. It was the reflex of people who had been hardened by years of proving themselves. Mara met his eyes and saw something familiar there, the need to dominate before being dominated. She nodded once and said that if he wanted a demonstration, she was willing. The room shifted. Instructors usually avoided spontaneous challenges. The lead evaluator hesitated, then gave a short nod. Controlled engagement only. No injuries. They squared off. The man was taller, heavier, built like a wall. He circled her with confidence, expecting her to retreat. Mara stayed center, her breathing slow, her gaze steady. She had trained in places where mistakes were paid for with more than embarrassment. She waited for the moment when confidence tipped into carelessness. He lunged, fast and aggressive, aiming to overwhelm her with strength. Mara moved with precision rather than speed. She redirected his momentum, stepped inside his reach, and applied a technique so clean it looked simple. Balance broke. Pressure shifted. The mat met his back before the room could inhale. He was not hurt. He was controlled. And he was stunned. Silence fell like a curtain. 250 operators stared at the man on the ground, then back at Mara, who had already stepped away. She offered a hand. He took it, eyes wide, pride shaken but intact. The laughter did not return. Something else filled the space. Respect. Mara spoke then, not loudly, not triumphantly. She said that softness was not weakness. It was efficiency. It was the ability to move without wasted effort, to act without noise, to end conflict without spectacle. She said that the most dangerous people she had known were the ones who did not need to prove anything. The rest of the day unfolded differently. Questions replaced jokes. Challenges became drills. Mara demonstrated techniques designed for survival, not show. She explained principles learned from years, embedded with teams that operated where rules were thin and consequences were absolute. She never named her missions. She never listed her accomplishments. She taught by doing, and by the end of the session, every operator there understood that they had witnessed something rare. During a break, the man who had mocked her approached. His voice was quieter now. He thanked her for the lesson and admitted he had underestimated her. Mara nodded and said that underestimation was common. It kept her alive. He asked where she had learned to move like that. She answered honestly, from people who did not come home. From mistakes she never intended to repeat. As the sun dipped behind the compound walls, the lead evaluator gathered the group. He spoke about adaptability, about humility, about the danger of assuming you knew everything. He did not single Mara out, but his eyes found her anyway. When the operators dispersed, conversations followed her path. Not gossip. Curiosity. Respect earned the hard way. Later, alone in the locker room, Mara sat on a bench and breathed. Moments like these always stirred memories she kept buried. Faces, names, decisions made in seconds that echoed for years. She had chosen this path not for recognition, but to pass on what she had learned before time took it away. If one person left that mat safer than they arrived, it was worth it. The next morning, the compound felt different. Greetings were crisp. Space was given without being asked. When Mara spoke, people listened. Not because she demanded it, but because she had shown what competence looked like without arrogance. The mocking man volunteered for every drill she led. He pushed himself harder than anyone else, not to prove dominance, but to improve. At the final briefing, Mara was introduced properly. Her rank was mentioned. Her unit affiliation was acknowledged without detail. A quiet murmur moved through the room as understanding settled. She had not been soft. She had been precise. She had not been untested. She had been tempered. Before she left, the lead evaluator thanked her and said that the lesson would stay with them. Mara replied that lessons only mattered if they changed behavior. She hoped they would remember that strength came in many forms, and that the loudest person in the room was rarely the most capable. As she walked out of the compound, the gate closing behind her, Mara felt the familiar mix of relief and weight. Proving herself was never the goal. Correcting assumptions was. Somewhere, another room would doubt her, another voice would mock, and another lesson would be taught. She accepted that as part of the work. The story of that day would spread, reshaped by retelling, but the truth would remain simple. Respect is not demanded. It is demonstrated. Power does not shout. It moves with purpose. And the people who change rooms are often the ones you almost overlook. What did this story make you feel? Where are you watching from? Subscribe to Soul Relief Stories for more real stories that heal the heart.